Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The mechanical hum of Keaton's workshop provided a steady backdrop as he adjusted the final components on his latest project. His fingers, calloused from years of precision work, tightened the last screw with practiced ease. At 39, Keaton Briggs had built a reputation designing custom machinery for Portland's growing eco-friendly startups. The work suited him: methodical, precise, requiring an eye for detail that most people missed. His phone buzzed. A message from Arlize. "Don't forget dinner tonight. 7 sharp." Keaton checked his watch. 5:43 p.m. He hadn't forgotten, but the reminder struck him as odd. Their 10th anniversary had passed last month with little fanfare. Arlize had been at a wellness retreat. Now she was insisting on celebrating his birthday with unusual enthusiasm. When he pulled into their driveway at 6:52, the house glowed warmly against the darkening Portland sky. Inside, Arlize moved through their modernist living room with the fluid grace that had first drawn him to her 5 years earlier. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek knot. Her dress simple but elegant, a calculated contrast to the minimalist decor she'd curated for their home. "Right on time," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Come sit." Dinner was his favorite: grilled salmon with roasted vegetables, but Keaton found himself studying his wife more than enjoying the meal. Something in her posture seemed rehearsed, her laughter a beat too deliberate when he mentioned a client's bizarre request for a machine that sorted mushroom spores. The space between them felt wider than the polished dining table. "I got you something," Arlize said, pushing a small box across the table after they'd finished eating. "Happy birthday." Keaton opened it carefully. Inside, nestled against dark velvet, was a gold wristwatch. Not sleek or minimalist like everything else Arlize chose, but ornate, almost baroque in its detailing. The face was cream-colored, the numerals elegantly scripted. It looked expensive and completely unlike anything she would normally select. "It's vintage," she explained, watching him intently. "I thought you might appreciate the craftsmanship." "It's beautiful," Keaton said, genuinely surprised. He slipped it onto his wrist, feeling its substantial weight. "Where did you find it?" "A little antique shop downtown." The owner said it was from the 1940s. "Swiss-made." She reached across and adjusted the clasp. Her fingers lingered on his wrist a moment too long, almost possessive. "It suits you." Later, as they sat on opposite ends of their sofa, Keaton caught her staring at the watch on his wrist, her expression unreadable. When he asked if everything was all right, she smiled and moved closer, initiating physical contact for the first time in weeks. "Everything's perfect," she murmured, kissing him with unexpected intensity. That night, for the first time in months, they slept together. As Arlize drifted off beside him, Keaton stared at the ceiling, unsettled by the sudden shift. Something had changed, but he couldn't put his finger on what. The silent distance of recent months had been replaced by something that felt equally wrong, a performance of intimacy that rang hollow. The watch gleamed on the nightstand, catching moonlight through the blinds. A thoughtful gift, perhaps, but it felt like a piece from someone else's life, not theirs. Keaton flexed his hand in the darkness, still feeling the phantom weight of the timepiece on his wrist point 3 days after his birthday. Keaton woke with a splitting headache and a mouth that tasted like copper. He stumbled to the bathroom, splashed cold water on his face, and stared at his reflection. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally alert gaze seemed dulled. "You look terrible," Arlize said from the doorway, her tone hovering between concern and observation. "Just tired," Keaton replied, though he couldn't remember the last time a full night's sleep had left him feeling this drained. That be why the afternoon, his concentration had frayed completely. Twice he'd made calculation errors that would have been disastrous if he hadn't caught them during testing. His skin itched, especially around his wrist where the watch sat. When he stood too quickly, the world tilted and swam. Keaton drove to Beau's auto shop after work, needing the simple comfort of his oldest friendship. The garage smelled of oil and metal, familiar and grounding. Beau Chandler was bent over the engine of a classic Mustang, his broad shoulders straining against his work shirt. At 42, The former Marine still moved with military efficiency, his hands steady despite their size. "You look like warmed over hell," Bo said when he spotted Keaton, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "Our lies finally drive you to drink." "Think I'm coming down with something," Keaton admitted, leaning against a workbench. He rubbed his temples, trying to clear the fog that had settled over his thoughts. "Been feeling off since Monday." Bo's eyes narrowed as he took in Keaton's appearance. "That new?" he asked, nodding toward the gold watch. "Birthday gift from our lies." Bo let out a low whistle. "Fancy. Not her usual style, though." "That's what I thought." "Things any better between you two?" Bo asked, passing Keaton a bottle of water from a small refrigerator in the corner. Keaton took a long drink before answering. "Different. Not better. She's been attentive since my birthday. But it feels wrong somehow." "Wrong how?" "Like she's playing a part." Keaton flexed his hand, noticing the red irritation around his wrist where the watch had been. "We barely touched for months, then suddenly she can't keep her hands off me. But it's cold, calculated. Like she's checking boxes." Bo crossed his arms, his expression darkening. "You sure she's not trying to clock you out early?" "What?" "That fancy new watch. You start feeling sick right after you get it." Bo gestured to Keaton's reddened wrist. "Could be an allergy to the metal, I guess. Or something else." Keaton stared at his friend, the suggestion too absurd to consider. "You think my wife is trying to poison me with a watch?" Bo shrugged, but his eyes remained serious. "I think it's weird that she gets you jewelry that looks nothing like what she likes, then you get sick. And I think it's convenient that she's suddenly acting like wife of the year when you're feeling too weak to question it." The headache pulsed behind Keaton's eyes. "That's paranoid, even for you." "Maybe." Bo took a step closer, lowering his voice. "But I've seen how she looks at you when she thinks no one's watching. Not like a woman in love, Keaton. Like someone calculating profit margins." On the drive home, Keaton couldn't shake Bo's words. The watch felt heavy on his wrist, its ticking suddenly intrusive. By the time he reached their house, his hands were shaking and sweat beaded his forehead despite the cool evening. Arlize was working on her laptop at the kitchen island, her face bathed in blue screen light. "You're late," she said without looking up. "Stopped by Bo's shop." Keaton opened the refrigerator, more to cool his flushed face than from hunger. "Lost track of time. How is your pet Jarhead?" Her fingers continued their steady rhythm on the keyboard. "Don't call him that." The irritation in his voice was sharper than he intended. Keaton took a breath, steadying himself. "Bo's fine. Busy with the shop." Arlize finally looked up, her gaze clinical as it swept over him. "You don't look well." Her eyes fixed on the watch, a flash of something disappointment, crossing her features before she smiled. "How thoughtful. Feeling any better today?" "Much better," Keaton lied, feeling the headache that had become his constant companion throb behind his eyes. Must have been a bug. That night, after Arlize fell asleep, Keaton sat in his car in the driveway and accessed the data from her laptop. What he found turned his blood to ice, that a string of messages between Arlize and someone named Laz Fenwick dated back 3 months. The earliest were innocuous discussions about a wellness retreat, spiritual growth, unlocking potential. By the second month, they'd turned personal. "Laz, how's the engineer? Still buried in his machines?" Arlize, as always. "He doesn't notice anything beyond his projects. Sometimes I wonder if he'd notice if I disappeared." "Laz, maybe it's time to find out." The most recent messages were explicit in their intentions, if carefully coded. "Laz, once you're free of the chain, we can start fresh. The retreat in Bali is waiting. Arlize, soon. The clock is ticking. Laz, how's our friend doing with his new timepiece?" Arlize, showing all the expected symptoms. "He thinks it's stress or a virus." It's almost sad how trusting he is. Keaton closed the laptop, his hands shaking with rage rather than toxicity. The betrayal was total, not just an affair, but a calculated murder plot. In their bed, Arlize was sleeping peacefully, dreaming perhaps of a life she'd have once he was gone. His phone buzzed with a text from Bo. "Found something. Call me point 20 minutes later." Keaton was looking at a photograph on Bo's phone. It showed Arlize entering an upscale apartment building downtown. "Took this yesterday during her supposed gym time," Bo said. "She spent 2 hours there. Who lives there? Got the name from the doorman. Lazarus Fenwick, 41. Calls himself a life strategist and motivational speaker. Charges $5,000 for weekend retreats. No formal qualifications, but he's got quite the following among bored rich people looking for meaning. Keaton recognized the name from the emails. Laz, you know him? I know he's sleeping with my wife and helping her kill me. Bo's expression hardened. What do you need me to do? I need to know everything about him. Where he goes, who he meets, any weaknesses or secrets. Keaton stared at the photograph, at the eager anticipation on Arli's face as she entered the building. And I need to play dead while I figure out exactly how deep this conspiracy goes. The home office yielded more evidence. Behind a false panel in Arli's desk drawer installed during the renovation, she'd insisted on last year, Keaton found a manila envelope containing documents with his forged signature. A revised will leaving everything to Arli's. A medical power of attorney giving her complete control over his healthcare decisions. Credit applications in his name. Using the cameras he'd installed, he watched Arli's enter the office when she thought he was at work. She made phone calls in hushed tones, checked accounts he didn't know existed, and once practiced forging his signature on blank sheets that she later shredded. The pieces fit together with horrifying clarity. The poison watch was killing him slowly. The forged documents ensured Arli's would control his medical care and inherit his assets. The credit lines in his name, totaling over $250,000, would provide immediate cash after his death point one evening. As they sat across from each other at dinner, Keaton deliberately knocked over his water glass. As Arli's moved to clean up the spill, an image flashed in his mind. Her father, Eldon McKee, at their wedding reception, watching his daughter with calculating eyes. You're just like him, aren't you? Keaton said quietly. Arli's froze, paper towels in hand. Like who? Your father. The way he measured everything by its value. The way he taught you that weakness deserves punishment. Something shifted in her expression: surprise, then wariness. Dad was a businessman. He understood how the world works. He was a sociopath who treated you like an investment. Keaton held her gaze. And now you're following his playbook. For a moment, genuine emotion cracked through her facade: anger, pain, defiance. Then her mask slipped back into place. You're confused again. Did you take your medication? No medication for what I've got, Keaton replied, letting weariness seep into his voice. This was the role he needed to play: the declining husband, unaware of the plot against him. Just tired. Don't mind me. Later, reviewing the camera footage, he watched Arli's make a call after he'd gone to bed. He's getting worse, she said to someone, Laz, presumably. Paranoid, bringing on my father. But he's still going to work. A pause. No, I don't think he suspects anything. He trusts me completely. Another pause, followed by a cold laugh. That's always been his weakness. The next afternoon, Keaton met Bo at a diner 20 miles outside Portland. Bo's sister Lita was with him, a sharp-featured woman in her early 30s with the same watchful eyes as her brother. Lita attends bar at the Undercut. Bo explained. It's all the gossip. Figured she might be useful. I remember you, Lita said, studying Keaton. Bo's friend who married the Ice Queen. She came into my bar once with her yoga friends. Treated me like the help, even though we'd met at your wedding. That sounds like Arli's, Keaton agreed. She's still with that Fenwick creep? Lita asked, sipping her coffee. He used to bring different women into my bar every month. Always the same type: wealthy, bored, married. He'd feed them lines about spiritual connection and breaking free of material constraints. Then he'd have them buying him drinks and hanging on every word. Keaton leaned forward. What else do you know about him? He's a fraud. Claims he was some high-powered executive who had a spiritual awakening, but I know for a fact he was selling timeshares in Florida 5 years ago. Got sued for fraud, reinvented himself as a guru, and moved here. Any weaknesses? Lita's smile was sharp. Gambling. High-stakes poker. He loses more than he wins, but keeps going back. And he's got a temper. When he's losing, got banned from a couple of underground games for making threats. The door to the diner opened, admitting a gust of cold air and a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and alert eyes. She spotted their table and walked over with confident strides. Vonda Arkin, Bo said by way of introduction. Former lawyer. Now works as a paralegal. Specializes in creative legal solutions. You must be the husband, Vonda said, sliding into the booth beside Lita. Bo, fill me in. You've got yourself a situation. My wife is trying to murder me and steal everything I own, Keaton said flatly. I'd call that a situation. Vonda nodded, unperturbed. Seen it before? Not usually with poison watches, but the motivation's always the same. Greed, control, a new lover. She pulled out a legal pad. What do you want to happen here? I want to expose them. Both of them. And I want to make sure Arlize doesn't get a penny of my money or a moment of freedom to enjoy her new life. Revenge, then. Vonda made a note. That's fine, but we need to be smart about it. You've got evidence of the poison watch. The pawnbroker who identified it is willing to testify. I've got the blood tests showing mercury poisoning, and I've saved the emails between Arlize and Laz discussing my deteriorating health. Good start. Not enough. Vonda's pen moved across the paper in quick strokes. We need to catch them explicitly planning your death. And we need to document the fraud with the forged documents. What's your timeline? I'm supposed to be dead within a month, based on the expected progression of the symptoms. Arlize has been talking about a healing weekend at a lakeside cabin next week. Perfect, Vonda said. If they're planning to accelerate things, that's where they'll discuss it. We need eyes and ears on that cabin. I've been following Fenwick, Bo added. He's married with kids, lives in Seattle. Comes down here 3 days a week, tells his wife he's running retreats. She has no idea about Arlize or the other women. Keaton felt cold clarity settling over him. So we have leverage. We have the beginnings of a plan, Vonda corrected. But we need to be careful. One wrong move, and they'll know you're onto them. Then they might try something more direct. Let them try, Keaton said, his voice hard. I'm done being the trusting husband. Keaton began his performance the next day. He stumbled slightly when rising from his chair at breakfast. He paused mid-sentence, pretending to search for words. He rubbed his temples frequently, wincing at loud noises. All the while, he watched Arlize watching him, noting the clinical assessment in her gaze. I made an appointment with Dr. Reiner, she told him over dinner. For next Tuesday, Keaton recognized the name from the forged medical power of attorney. Never heard of him. He specializes in neurological disorders. Arlize's voice was gentle, concerned the perfect worried spouse. With your symptoms, we should rule out anything serious. What symptoms exactly? Keaton asked, deliberately slurring the word exactly slightly. The headaches, the confusion, the memory lapses. She reached across the table to take his hand. You forgot your own mother's name yesterday. He hadn't, of course, but he nodded slowly, as if this information was troubling but not surprising. Maybe you're right. I should see someone. The flash of satisfaction in her eyes was quickly masked by sympathy. I'll take care of everything. You just focus on resting. That night, she helped him to bed like an invalid, her touch gentle but impersonal, a nurse with a terminal patient. When she thought he was asleep, she made another call to Laz. It's working perfectly, she whispered. The doctor will document his cognitive decline. I've already spoken with him about potential causes: early onset dementia, brain tumor. He'll order tests, but by the time they come back, Keaton listened, recording everything through the camera he'd hidden in the bedroom air vent. Each piece of evidence was another nail in her coffin. Meanwhile, Bo and Lita continued their surveillance of Laz. They discovered he had conned at least 3 other women in similar situations, bored wives looking for excitement, meaning, or escape. None had gone as far as attempted murder, but all had transferred significant funds to him before the relationships ended. He's got a pattern, Bo reported during one of their clandestine meetings. Meets them at his retreats, identifies vulnerabilities, promises transformation. Always targets women with money and unhappy marriages. And Arlize fell for it completely. Keaton said, the betrayal still raw despite everything he'd learned. She was the perfect mark, Lita added. Rich, discontented, raised by a father who taught her that power is the only thing that matters. Fenwick just tapped into what was already there. The healing weekend was scheduled for the following Friday, supposedly a retreat for Keaton to rest and recover at a remote cabin by Lake Oswego. In reality, based on fragments of conversation he'd overheard, it would be the site of his accidental drowning. They've rented the cabin for the full week, Vonda confirmed, having traced the booking through her contacts. Paid cash, but I got the address. Isolated spot, private dock. Perfect for staging an accident. We need ears inside that cabin before they arrive, Keaton said. If they're planning to kill me there, I want it recorded. Bo nodded grimly. Leave it to me. The cabin stood alone at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by tall pines and overlooking a quiet cove. Bo parked his truck out of sight and approached on foot, carrying a backpack of surveillance equipment. The lock on the back door yielded to his expertise in under a minute. Working quickly, he placed tiny cameras and microphones throughout the main living area, bedroom, and dock. The final touch was a weather-resistant drone the size of a hummingbird, which he hid in the chimney with a clear view of the dock area. All set, he reported to Keaton via text. Everything feeds directly to your secure server. Motion activated and running on independent battery power. The next day, following the GPS tracker Bo had placed on Arlai's car, they watched from a distance as she arrived at the cabin. An hour later, Laz Fenwick's Audi pulled up beside her Lexus on the laptop screen in Bo's truck. They watched the couple embrace in the cabin's living room. Laz was tall and fit, with the practiced good looks of a man who'd made his appearance part of his brand. His smile as he kissed Arlai's had a predatory quality. Let's talk through the plan again, Laz said, pouring wine into 2 glasses. Keaton's condition has been deteriorating for weeks. You bring him here for rest, privacy. Dr. Reiner has already documented cognitive issues and balance problems, Arlai's added, taking the wine. The mercury is affecting his neurological function, just as expected. Perfect. So Friday night, we give him something to help him sleep. I've got a sedative that won't appear in routine toxicology. Good girl. Laz's smile widened. Once he's under, we take him down to the dock. A tragic accident, he woke disoriented, wandered outside, fell in the water. With his documented medical issues, no one will question it. Arlai sipped her wine, her expression coolly practical. I've already spoken with the life insurance company about his concerning symptoms. They're expecting a claim. And how much is that claim worth? Laz asked, moving behind her to massage her shoulders. $2 million, plus the house, his business shares, and the new credit lines. Altogether, close to $5 million. She leaned into his touch. Enough for a fresh start far from here. You're brilliant, Laz murmured, kissing her neck. I knew the moment I met you that we were meant for greater things. In the truck, Keaton watched the scene unfold with cold fury. Here was the irrefutable proof his wife and her lover calmly discussing his murder over wine, planning to drown him and collect his life insurance. We've got them, Bo said quietly. Every word recorded. Not just recorded, Keaton replied, activating the drone hidden in the chimney. Its tiny camera zoomed in on Arlai's face as she laughed at something Laz whispered in her ear. Documented from every angle. On the cabin deck, the couple moved to the railing overlooking the water. Laz gestured to the dock below, demonstrating how they would carry Keaton's unconscious body. The drone captured every detail, their expressions, their gestures, their casual discussion of murder. It has to look like an accident, Arlai insisted. No bruises, no signs of struggle. Trust me, Laz said, pulling her close. By this time next week, you'll be a grieving widow with a fortune, and I'll be the supportive friend helping you through your loss. 6 months of proper mourning. Then we disappear together. Keaton had seen enough. He closed the laptop, the evidence safely backed up to multiple secure locations. Time for phase 2, he said to Bo, his voice steady despite the rage coursing through him. Let's introduce Mr. Fenwick to the consequences of his actions. The coffee shop was crowded, providing both witnesses and anonymity exactly what Keaton wanted for this confrontation. He spotted Laz Fenwick at a corner table, scrolling through his phone while sipping an elaborate espresso drink. The man exuded confidence, from his carefully styled hair to his expensive casual clothes. Keaton approached directly, sliding into the seat across from him without invitation. Lazarus Fenwick, life strategist, motivational speaker, adulterer. Laz looked up, startled, then quickly composed his features into professional concern. I'm sorry, do I know you? You know my wife, Arlize Briggs. Recognition flickered in Laz's eyes, followed immediately by calculation. His smile never wavered. Ah, Keaton, Arlize has mentioned you. She's been very concerned about your health recently. I'm sure she has. Keaton kept his voice level, studying the man who had plotted his death. She tells you everything, doesn't she? Laz set down his phone, his posture shifting subtly more alert, evaluating the threat. Arlize and I have a professional relationship. I've been helping her navigate the stress of your illness. Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're sleeping with my wife and planning my funeral. The smile finally slipped. Laz leaned forward, lowering his voice. I don't know what you think you know, but you're clearly unwell. Arlize told me about the paranoia, the confusion. You should be under medical care, not throwing around accusations in public. I'm not confused about what I saw at the lake house yesterday. Keaton held Laz's gaze steadily. The two of you seemed very comfortable planning my drowning. Alarm flashed across Laz's face before he could mask it. That's absurd. You weren't anywhere near the lake house. No, but my cameras were. And my microphones. Very thorough equipment. Captures everything, even discussions about sedatives and life insurance payouts. Laz's expression hardened. You're bluffing. And even if you weren't, it would be your word against ours. A mentally deteriorating man versus two credible witnesses. Except I'm not deteriorating. The mercury poisoning from that antique watch was real enough, but I caught it early. I've been faking the worst of the symptoms. Keaton allowed himself a cold smile. You should see the look on Arlize's face when she thinks I'm not watching, so satisfied with her handiwork. Laz pushed back from the table, gathering his things. This conversation is over. I suggest you seek help before you do something you'll regret. As he stood to leave, Keaton casually slid a photograph across the table. It showed two children, a boy around 10 and a girl perhaps 7, playing in a yard outside a Seattle suburban home. Beautiful family, Keaton said quietly. Do they know their father spends his weekends planning murders with his mistresses? Or does your wife, Deborah, still believe you're running spiritual retreats? Laz froze, his face draining of color. He snatched the photograph, crumpling it in his fist. You stay away from my family, like you stayed away from mine. Keaton stood, coming eye to eye with the taller man. You have 24 hours to end whatever this is with Arlize. After that, everything I have goes to the police and to Deborah. You'll be gone in a week anyway. Laz hissed, his composed facade cracking completely. I'll be comforting your widow while you rot. We'll see who's comforting whom. Keaton turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Laz, I know about Florida. The fraud charges. The investors you cheated. I wonder if the Oregon State Licensing Board knows about that history. Laz's face contorted with rage. You're dead already, he spat. You just don't know it yet. Keaton smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. No, Laz, you're the one who doesn't know what's coming. The anonymous packages were delivered simultaneously, one to Deborah Fenwick in Seattle, one to Arlize's parents in Beaverton, one to the Oregon Professional Licensing Board, and one to the detective who had investigated Laz's fraud case in Florida. Each contained selected evidence. Photos of Laz and Arlize together, transcripts of their conversations planning Keaton's murder, documentation of the poison watch, financial records showing money transfers from Arlize to Laz, copies of the forged documents. B.O. watched Laz's apartment building, while Keaton monitored the surveillance feeds at home. It didn't take long for the chaos to begin. Deborah Fenwick called her husband 17 times in the span of 2 hours. When he finally answered, their conversation was explosive, her screams audible even through the closed windows of his downtown apartment. Meanwhile, Arlize received a call from her father. Keaton watched through the hidden camera as she paced the living room, her voice rising in defensive anger. It's not what it looks like, she insisted. Keaton is mentally ill. He's been making wild accusations, forging documents to frame me. A pause. Of course I'm not trying to kill him. I've been taking care of him through this whole breakdown. When she hung up, her composed facade had cracked. She immediately called Laz, but he didn't answer. Her next call was to their bank, where she attempted to transfer funds from their joint account to one in her name only. Keaton had anticipated this. All accounts were already frozen pending a fraud investigation he'd initiated through Vonda's legal channels. The final blow came that evening. Bo called Keaton, his voice tight with excitement. Fenwick's on the move. Packed a suitcase, cleaned out his apartment. Looks like he's running. Stay with him, Keaton instructed. Let me know where he goes. 3 hours later, Laz Fenwick was arrested attempting to board a flight to Mexico using a false passport. The airport security had been tipped off anonymously about a passenger matching his description carrying large amounts of undeclared cash. When Arlize learned of Laz's arrest from the evening news, she tried calling him again repeatedly. Each time, the call went straight to voicemail. Keaton watched her growing panic with grim satisfaction. The trap was closing. That night, he didn't come home. Instead, he sent Arlize a text. Working late. Don't wait up at in reality. He was meeting with Detective Miranda Torres of the Portland Police Department, laying out evidence of the murder plot, the fraud, and the conspiracy. Torres listened without interruption, her expression growing more grave with each revelation. This is extraordinarily well documented, she said when he finished. Most victims don't have this level of evidence. Most victims don't catch on until it's too late, Keaton replied. When will you make the arrest? We'll pick her up tomorrow morning. In the meantime, do not go home. Do not contact her. If she realizes you're onto her, there's no telling what she might do. Keaton nodded, thinking of the woman he'd married, the woman he thought he knew. She won't expect it. She still thinks I'm her slowly dying husband, oblivious to everything. That's what will make this stick, Torres said, gathering the evidence files. The completeness of her deception, documented in her own words. As he left the police station, Keaton felt no triumph, only a hollow certainty that justice was coming. Arlize returned from her morning run to find the house eerily quiet. Keaton's car was gone from the garage. His workspace in the basement was untouched from the day before. Calling his office yielded nothing. He hadn't come in today. She moved through the house. A sense of wrongness grew. Something had changed. Drawers that should have been locked were open. Papers on her desk had been disturbed. The hidden panel in her office where she kept the forged documents stood slightly ajar. Panic rose in her throat. She rushed to check the secret compartment, finding it empty. The forged will, the power of attorney, the fraudulent credit applications all gone. Her phone rang, startling her. Laz's name appeared on the screen, the first call from him since his arrest. She answered immediately. Where are you? What happened? She demanded. It's over, Arlize. His voice was flat, defeated. They know everything. Keaton knows everything. What are you talking about? Keaton is clueless. He can barely remember his own name. He's been playing you, Laz said bitterly. The confusion, the memory problems, all an act. He's known about the watch, about us, about the plan at the lake. He's been recording everything. That's impossible, she whispered, but even as she said it, pieces began falling into place. Keaton's convenient absences, his occasional sharp moments of clarity amid the confusion, the questions about her father that seemed too pointed to be coincidental. They've frozen my accounts, Laz continued. They're talking about attempted murder charges. 20 years minimum. I'm cooperating, Arlize. It's the only way to reduce the sentence. You're lying, she hissed. This is some kind of trick. Check your laptop, he said wearily. He left something for you. The call ended. Arlize stood frozen for a moment, then rushed to her laptop. A flash drive she didn't recognize was plugged into the USB port. With trembling fingers, she opened it. The screen filled with images herself and Laz at the lake house, planning Keaton's drowning. The poison watch being examined by a man she didn't recognize. Bank statements showing transfers to offshore accounts in her name. The forged documents spread out on an evidence table at what appeared to be a police station, but a video began playing Keaton looking directly into the camera, his eyes clear and cold. By now you've realized your plan has failed, he said, his voice steady. The mercury poisoning was real, but not as effective as you hoped. I've been documenting your betrayal for weeks. Every conversation, every forgery, every transfer of funds. The police have it all. Arlize slammed the laptop shut, her breathing ragged. She had to leave now, before they came for her. She rushed to the bedroom, pulling out a suitcase, throwing in clothes haphazardly. Her credit cards were declined at the ATM. Her passport was missing from its hiding place. When she tried to call her private banker, the account had been flagged for fraud investigation. The doorbell rang, followed by an authoritative knock. Through the front window, she could see 2 police cars in the driveway, officers approaching the house. Trapped, Arlize sank onto the sofa, her mind racing through scenarios, excuses, explanations. None would work. The evidence was too complete. The police entered with a warrant, Detective Torres in the lead. Arlize composed her features into confused innocence. What's happening? Has something happened to my husband? Arlize Briggs, Torres said formally. You're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. The words washed over her as the handcuffs closed around her wrists. Through the window, she caught a glimpse of Keaton standing beside Bo Chandler near one of the police cars. His face was impassive as he watched her being led out of the house they'd shared. Keaton, she called desperately. This is all a mistake. I was trying to help you. He didn't respond, didn't even look at her directly. His gaze was fixed somewhere beyond her, already moving past this moment, past her. As they placed her in the back of the police car, the reality of her situation finally broke through her denial. Everything was gone, Laz. The money, the future she'd planned. All of it destroyed by the husband she'd underestimated completely. The courtroom was quieter than Keaton had expected, the proceedings moving with efficient gravity. He sat in the front row beside Bo and Vonda, watching as Arlize was led and wearing a beige jumpsuit that drained the color from her face, but she'd lost weight in the weeks since her arrest. Her hair, normally styled to perfection, was pulled back severely from her face, but her posture remained proud, defiant even in defeat. The evidence presentation was methodical and devastating. The prosecution played recordings of Arlize and Laz planning Keaton's death. They showed the poison watch, now sealed in an evidence bag, and explained the mechanism of the dimethylmercury delivery system. Medical experts testified about Keaton's blood tests, confirming mercury poisoning consistent with the watch exposure. Financial records detailed the money trail funds siphoned from joint accounts, credit lines opened in Keaton's name, life insurance policies recently increased. The forged documents were presented with handwriting analysis confirming Arlize as the forger. Most damning was Laz's testimony. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he provided complete details of the conspiracy, from its inception at the wellness retreat to the final plans for Keaton's accidental drowning at the lake. Throughout it all, Arlize maintained her composure, occasionally whispering to her attorney. Only when Keaton took the stand did her mask slip, revealing flashes of the cold fury beneath. Mr. Briggs, the prosecutor asked, when did you first suspect your wife was trying to kill you? Well, I began experiencing symptoms after wearing the watch she gave me, Keaton replied, his voice steady. A friend suggested I have it examined. That's when I learned it contained poison. And rather than confront her immediately, you gathered evidence. Yes, I needed to understand the full extent of her plans. Keaton looked directly at Arlize for the first time. I needed to know if there was any explanation besides the obvious that my wife wanted me dead. What did you discover? That she and her lover had been planning my murder for months. That she had forged documents to control my assets after my death. That she had systematically created a false medical history suggesting I was mentally deteriorating to make my eventual death seem unsurprising. Arlize's attorney cross-examined him aggressively, suggesting that Keaton had manipulated evidence, that his surveillance was illegal, that he had entrapped his wife. Through it all, Keaton remained composed, answering truthfully but without emotion. When the verdict came 3 days later, it was unanimous on all counts. Guilty of attempted murder in the first degree. Guilty of conspiracy. Guilty of fraud, forgery, identity theft. The judge prepared to announce sentencing. Arlize was given the opportunity to speak. She rose slowly, turning to face Keaton rather than the judge. I made a mistake, she said, her voice breaking with what might have been genuine emotion. I was unhappy, confused. Laz manipulated me, made me believe things that weren't true. I never would have gone through with it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Please, Keaton. You know me. You know I'm not a murderer. The courtroom was silent, all eyes on him. Keaton met her gaze steadily. The sentencing is in the judge's hands, not mine, he said quietly. But I do know you, Arlies. Better than you think. I know you're exactly what the evidence shows you to be. Her face hardened. You were never a man, she hissed, the mask of contrition falling away completely. Just a project, a means to an end. My father was right about you, weak, easily controlled. Yet I survived what you couldn't kill, Keaton replied simply, turning away from her. The judge sentenced her to 22 years in prison without possibility of parole for 10 years. As she was led away, Arlies never looked back at the husband whose murder had been meant to fund her new life. Outside the courthouse, reporters called questions that Keaton ignored. Beau's solid presence beside him kept the crowd at bay as they made their way to the car. It's over, Beau said once they were driving away. She can't hurt you anymore. Keaton watched the courthouse recede in the side mirror. It was over the moment I found out about the watch. Everything since then has just been procedure. 6 months later, Keaton pulled into the gravel parking lot beside Beau's auto shop. The building next door, once a defunct warehouse, now sported a fresh coat of paint and a new sign. Bridgetown Maker's Workshop. Inside, the space had been transformed. Workbenches lined the walls, each equipped with tools and safety equipment. Computer stations with design software occupied one corner. A central area held larger machinery, 3D printers, laser cutters, metalworking equipment. Hubby was showing a group of teenagers how to safely operate a lathe, his patient instructions punctuated by questions from the enthusiastic students. He looked up as Keaton entered, offering a quick nod before returning to his demonstration. This was their new venture, a community workshop where young people could learn practical engineering and mechanical skills. Funded in part by the sale of Keaton's former house, he couldn't bear to live there after everything that had happened, and by grants Vonda had helped secure, the workshop was already proving popular. Keaton moved through the space, checking in with students, answering questions about a robotics project one group was struggling with. The work gave him purpose, a way to channel his expertise into something positive after so much darkness. Later, as the last students left, and he helped Beau close up, Keaton felt a familiar weight in his pocket. Almost forgot, he said, pulling out a small box. Got something for you. Beau opened it to find a sleek modern wristwatch with a simple black band. What's this for? A thank you for having my back, for believing me when even I wasn't sure what was happening. Keaton managed a small smile. Don't worry, this one's not poisoned. Beau laughed, strapping the watch to his wrist. Never doubted you for a second. Even when you married her. You did, actually. Said she was too polished, too perfect. And I was right. Beau's expression sobered. You doing okay? Really? Keaton considered the question. The trial had made headlines, turning his private betrayal into public spectacle. The pity in people's eyes when they recognized him was almost worse than the notoriety. But he was sleeping again. The mercury finally cleared from his system. The nightmares were less frequent. I'm getting there, he said truthfully, one day at a time. After saying goodbye to Beau, Keaton drove to the Willamette River. He parked near a pedestrian bridge and walked out to the middle, gazing down at the dark water flowing beneath. The spring evening was cool, but not cold, the setting sun painting the river with gold and orange. From his pocket, he withdrew the duplicate poison watch Harlan had helped him create for the trial, identical to the original that was now secured in police evidence. He held it in his palm, feeling its weight one last time. The watch had been meant to end his life. Instead, it had revealed the truth and set him free from a marriage built on lies. In a strange way, he owed it a debt. With a decisive motion, Keaton tossed the watch into the river. It disappeared beneath the surface with barely a splash. Carried away by the current toward the distant sea, he remained on the bridge a moment longer, watching the water flow beneath him, the same water where Arlies had planned to drown him. Then he turned and walked back towards solid ground, his steps lighter than they had been in months. The future stretched before him, uncertain but his own, not poisoned by betrayal, not measured in borrowed time, but opened to possibilities he was only beginning to imagine.